RPN, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.
This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by listeners like you, supporters on Patreon. Join us today at patreon.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 372, For the Uniform.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, it is our mission to take a look at a story from every angle, figuring out, in the end, who's the hero, who's the villain, and sometimes the line that divides them gets blurrier and blurrier.
Wow. Well, that sounds kind of bleak. Today's episode, For the Uniform, the one where we learn where Starfleet does its dry cleaning.
No, it's definitely not about that.
No, but I was trying to lighten the mood before we get into it. Okay, fine. It's the one where personal vendetta and principle collide, and good guys become bad guys in order to become good guys. That maybe...
There's a lot of that to unpack, and we will get to that soon enough. But first, a little moment for Mission Log station identification. Mission Log relies on your participation. So that's why we want to hear from you. Help us spread the word by giving us a like or a share on Facebook or Twitter, where you'll find us at Mission Log Pod. Tell others about us there, and if you're inclined to leave us a review at Apple Podcasts, we'll be grateful, and we'll share those in a future supplemental. You can reach us on Skype at Mission Log Pod, or by calling 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com, and remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. And now, here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
Why, thank you, Norman. This week, For the Uniform. We have a story and teleplay written by Peter Allen Fields. What a welcome surprise to see Peter's name on this episode. We had discussed way back on Mission Log how Peter had a long career in TV writing and production, and a long association with shows like, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Might have mentioned that once or twice in the past. He was brought in early as a producer-writer on DS9, and then he retired. But come on, you can't keep a good man down. He wasn't really done. He contributed this script and two more yet to come. Now, uncredited on this episode, Hans Beimler did some script polishing, so he's got his fingerprints on this one too. It was directed by Victor Loewe, a new name for us. This episode marks the first of just 6 episodes of Trek that he will helm. That would be 4 on DS9 and 2 more on Voyager. He was, essentially recruited by Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler, and he already had some great genre credits to his name, like V, the series, and Max Headroom. Now, let's talk about the USS Malinche. Important here for thematic reasons. You know that I like talking about starship names and where they came from, and this one, this one is really interesting. La Malinche was the lover of Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez. The story is very complicated, and I'm not going to be able to get into all the details and do it all justice here. So I do suggest taking a look at online biographical resources. But the important things to know are that she was captured early in her life and given as a slave to the conquistadors. She was very smart, spoke several languages, and became integral to Cortez's campaign, mostly as an interpreter. While Cortez had allied with the Tlaxcalans, the Choluans planned an attack which some believe Malinche heard of and tipped off the Spanish. Now, legend tends to grow in many directions in more than 500 years, and depending on who is telling the history now, Malinche could be seen as a key figure in the founding of modern Mexico or as a betrayer to her people. So we can absorb that and think about that thematically as it relates to this story today. The starship model portraying the USS Malinche is definitely an Excelsior class, likely one of the smaller non-Enterprise B variants. Let's talk about guest stars. Two, of course, to point out. We welcome back Kenneth Marshall as Michael Eddington. Gee, I wonder if this is the end of the road for him on DS9. I guess we'll have to stick around and find out. And we have Eric Pierpoint playing Captain Sanders of the USS Malinche. Here he is in his human form, but we've seen Eric on Trek before under some makeup when he was Volval on the TNG episode Liaisons. You may remember Eric under some pretty heavy makeup again as one of the stars of the TV series Alien Nation alongside Gary Graham. And just for you, Norman, don't forget that he had a one-time guest role on Babylon 5. There are certainly many more credits to his name, and we will catch up again with Eric in both Enterprise and Voyager.
The day begins, and now let's see what this episode will do for Norman and John.
Prologue. Captain Sisko is undercover on Marva 4, not far from the Badlands, looking for the Maquis leader and especially for Michael Eddington to bring him home. Well, guess what? He found Eddington, or rather Eddington found Sisko, at the end of a Klingon disruptor. But Eddington's loyalties lie with those former colonists whose homes were taken, handed over to the Cardassians. Those people dreamed a dream when hope was high and life worth living. Sisko is indignant that Eddington, the traitor, is harming those people by selling the lie that they can one day go back to their old homes, their old lives. Eddington doesn't have any more time for the debate, though. He just wants to leave and tells Sisko not to follow him as he beams up to his Maquis raider to get away. Sisko does exactly the opposite of what Eddington tells him, contacts a Defiant to beam him up, and set in a pursuit course for Eddington. Act 1. The chase is on, but Eddington has moved too fast. To get some help, Sisko calls up Captain Sanders of the USS Malinche to see if he can intercept, and what's this? They're talking on some kind of newfangled 3D hologram-emitting communicator? Okay, we'll go with it. Sanders says he can take up the pursuit, but Eddington makes a surprise move. He turns his raider around and aims right for the Defiant. Before the Defiant can take a shot at the raider, Worf announces that their weapons systems are down. Kira confirms all their systems are failing. Then who should appear in the holocommunicator to give Sisko the bad news? It's Eddington. He sabotaged the system, and there is no way to fix it without going back to the station. As Eddington's ship takes easy shots at the Defiant, he explains that he isn't going to kill them. The Maquis aren't killers, and their fight is with the Cardassians. An infuriated Sisko is left to limp home. Act 2. Towed back to DS9 by the Malinche. The repair time on Defiant is going to run nearly 2 weeks. Eddington left another little surprise, too. The same technique he used to damage the Defiant's computers has also been planted all over the station. They've got their work cut out, hacking away system by system to try to prevent failures there. And Sisko is in for a little more bad news. Captain Sanders from the Malinche has been ordered by Starfleet to take over pursuit of Eddington, specifically leaving Sisko out of the mission. It's been 8 months, and maybe some fresh blood, someone who is not so close to the situation, is what's needed. Sisko takes the news calmly, professionally, then beats the tar out of a punching bag while venting to Dax. He got fooled, and this is the first time he's been taken off an assignment. Dax says he's just got to let it go, that Eddington is someone else's problem now. Then there's a report. While those Cardassians are trying to escape, Eddington has enough of the stolen raw materials to fire enough of the bioagent at every Cardassian-inhabited world in the DMZ. With relief efforts underway, and Eddington now sneaking off to the Badlands again, there's only one choice for Sisko: launch the Defiant and take off after the Maquis himself. Act 3. On board Defiant, What's working is not anywhere near 100%. Stabilizers, transporters, weapons, warp engines, even communications, which means Cadet Nog will be along to act as voice and ears between departments. With a moment to themselves, Sisko and Dax have a heart-to-heart. He suspects it looks like he's acting irrationally, emotionally motivated to carry out a vendetta, and he should probably go back to DS9 and sit this one out. Dax says, on the contrary, she gets it. Maybe it's the Curzon in her. Systems are a go, as they can be, which means the Defiant heads for the Badlands. As soon as they get there, a signal that looks like a Maquis raider shows up, and sure enough, there's Eddington in the holocommunicator. He teases Sisko that he won't catch him, but Eddington sends over a gift, a book, Les Miserables, by Victor Hugo. When Sisko tries to fire on Eddington's ship, nothing. It was a false signal relayed by an unmanned probe, and Eddington is nowhere to be found. But Sisko knows he's there, out in the darkness, a fugitive running. Defiant leaves the plasma fields of the Badlands, only to find that this diversion covered a Maquis attack on the Malinche. She's dead in space. Act 4. It's bad. Even with the help from a team from the Defiant, the Malinche is a couple of days away from being operational again. The story is familiar, though. They were trying to help what they thought was a Cardassian freighter, only it was a decoy and opened them up for a Maquis attack. Sanders realizes he's out of the fight for now, but he does have something that might help Sisko. An intercepted and coded message from one of Eddington's raiders. They'll pass that along to Odo back on DS9 and see if he can crack it. In due time, he does. The good news is he cracked it. The bad news is it's a Breen nursery rhyme. That doesn't mean much, unless you take it at face value. There is a Breen settlement on Portus 5. They're good at keeping things cold. Eddington needs a place to keep his components of his weapons cold. So, look there. Sure enough, sensor logs show activity out that way, like a freighter coming and going from there. From this bit of intelligence, and extrapolating from both the ship's heading and Eddington's flair for the unpredictable, Sisko and his crew surmised the next attack will be at Quatal Prime. When they get close, they're too late. Eddington has already deployed his weapon, and the Cardassians are scrambling to evacuate the planet while they still can. Defiant picks up 2 Maquis raiders leaving the scene and very quickly destroys one. The second turns around toward the planet, though, and opens fire on the one Cardassian transport ship carrying people away. Now Eddington taunts Sisko with this dilemma. Stay behind to rescue the Cardassians, or chase down Eddington while allowing the transport ship to crash. Act 5. Letting Eddington go, the Defiant tractor beam tows the Cardassian ship to safety, which leaves Sisko some time to contemplate what has transpired and what his next move should be. He's in the mess hall, surrounded by empty chairs and empty tables, reading The Gift from Eddington, when Dax stops by to say that she's always hated Victor Hugo's two-dimensional characters. Sisko thinks he can find some inspiration here, though. The story of the noble criminal who is treated unjustly by the unsympathetic lawman. If Eddington sees himself in the role of the hero, then maybe what he needs is a true enemy, one who will force him to make a grand, sacrificial gesture. There's a reckoning still to be reckoned, and there's going to be hell to pay. Sisko orders the crew to ready 2 quantum torpedoes packed with trilithium and lays in a course for the Maquis colony on Solosos 3. Then he transmits a message to every Maquis channel in range. They're ready to fire on that planet, rendering it uninhabitable to humans for the next 50 years. It's time to pack up and leave. The crew of the Defiant are stunned, but they lay in a course and lock weapons. Then, with less than a minute to go, Eddington appears in the holocommunicator and calls Sisko's bluff. Only it's no bluff. The order is given. The torpedoes are launched, and trilithium resin permeates the atmosphere. Then Sisko announces that he will carry on with the same action on every Maquis colony in order to eliminate their threat. Eddington pleads with Sisko to think of all those people, all the refugees he's creating. Sisko says that he should have thought of that when he attacked the Malinche. New orders are given to prepare 2 more quantum torpedoes and set a course for Traken 2. Eddington watches in disbelief that Sisko would betray his principles to settle a vendetta, that he would betray his uniform in this way. But Sisko lashes back that Eddington betrayed those principles long ago, and now the captain is ready to fire at his next target. Eddington relents. Just stop firing on these Maquis settlements, and he will hand over the biogenic weapons. Not good enough for Sisko. So Eddington gives in. He'll turn over the weapons and himself. Later at Deep Space Nine, Sisko reports that the affected colonists will swap places. The Cardassians and the human and other settlers will have to move to opposing planets where they won't be affected by lingering bioagents in the atmosphere. Eddington is handed over to Odo for whatever awaits him because those who falter and those who fail must pay the price. At the end of the day, there's the matter of Starfleet. Dax wonders if Sisko ran any of his plan by his superiors, to which Sisko says he knew he forgot something, because at the end of the day, there's another day dawning. The end.
Well, thank you for that wonderful wrap-up, John. And I know it was very difficult for you to navigate the waters between musical theater and television drama. But you did a great job, and I hope that everyone had their ears and their subspace frequencies wide open for that.
Thank you.
But now we're going to jump into the observations. And the one thing I wanted to start with here, John, is I loved the total atmosphere of this episode. I just love the way it was shot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And especially for a new director to really come in with a lot of challenges. You know, you have the standing sets of DS9 and the Defiant, but they're being used in different ways. And yes, that refugee camp, so often we get kind of the standard like Star Trek caves. You just throw people in ratty clothes in there, and that's sort of what you get, but done so well. And I didn't point out earlier, there is a reference that I read about from one of my favorite movies of all time, but it didn't click with me until I read about it, and that would be from The Adventures of Robin Hood, starring Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, Basil Rathbone. So that is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. And there is this scene where Errol Flynn as Robin Hood tells Olivia de Havilland as Maid Marian, look at them. And he's pointing out the poor people who are, you know, the victims here in King John's England, and how he has set about to help them, you know. And so they kind of mimicked that with that scene of Eddington and Sisko. Thought it was very clever. And I don't know necessarily the director had that in mind, but certainly the writers did. And
well, and it definitely circled back to Robin Hood when they were talking about kind of like Eddington's psyche.
Yeah.
Right, you know?
Yeah.
Being this larger-than-life romantic hero figure.
Yeah, I called it out specifically. I'll be honest with you and with our audience up front here. This episode, I feel like you and I are just going to riff a lot, so I didn't take the volume of notes that I normally take for this segment. Even for the next segment, I feel like we're just going to go. Just wind us up and let us go. So there's some stuff that I want to hit here that we might have saved for other parts of the podcast. I just want to get this out right up front. I do not love the holocommunicator. And we could spend a lot of time on this here. So I'll tell you, I think partly it is the execution within the show, and I think partly it's because we're sort of changing things midstream here. And it's also partly, you know, we try very hard on Mission Log to not break the timeline. I know, and we do that just really for our own sanity. So we're not always trying to connect the dots, and we can stay focused on the episode at hand. But the reality is that we have this holocommunicator that has shown up in later Star Trek, and I think executed very well, because you get why it's there, you get when it doesn't work, and they're able to create an effect out of it. really truly make it a hologram where people can walk through. And there's like a little bit of a glitchy projected look to it when you're doing it in modern Star Trek. When you do it here, really all it's doing is serving the dramatic purpose of getting those actors in the same room, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is they are literally in the same room shooting that scene. So the lighting is the same on both of them, whether it's Sanders or Eddington there on the Defiant. Their physicality, their sort of occupation of that space just feels like, well, we cheaped out because we needed to put the actor here, as opposed to doing what would have been a very expensive effect at the time, which is to give them a little bit of shimmer, give them a little bit of a, projected in and out. So it didn't work for me. And I have to say that I kept thinking about the way it did work in The Wrath of Khan. So now I'm specifically breaking the timeline to go backward, which is fair game here, because that's a movie, remember, where your protagonist and antagonist never meet, except through a view screen.
Right.
And they played it extraordinarily well. So I fully understand and I fully appreciate why they wanted to introduce this technology for this episode and just say, okay, now we have this thing, because they wanted to get those actors in the same room. But I think Star Trek had already proven to itself they didn't have to do that. And it honestly left me cold. Now tell me why you feel differently.
Well, I like it as the idea. I like the idea, of having them shot in the same scene. I think it gives it a little bit better sense of, like, Sisko wants to reach out and throttle Eddington, like, right there, but he can't. He knows it's not him, but he's that close, right? He's so close to his target. And being on a view screen, it just feels like he's talking to a view screen. Like, the target could be a million parsecs away, could be being relayed from a drone or anything like that. But when you see him, like, physically in front of him, like 3 feet away, I think it adds something to us projecting our own psyche into Sisko and saying, like, he's right there. You're so close.
Right.
And you can reach out and almost grab him and bring him to justice and throw him in the brig, but it's not him. I don't know. For me, it didn't necessarily work from a special effects technological perspective, but it did, making me feel like, wow, they're right in that same room. And because a lot of this has this Les Miserables kind of flavor to it, it felt very much like two people who are probably experienced stage actors in their own right having that stage moment.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the lighting, don't you know, John, everything is like so downlit in every single ship every time.
Yeah.
Lighting would be consistent.
Yeah. See, I agree with your reasoning of why you liked it. I think, and again, it's one of those hindsight things, and we obviously special effects have come a long way in the 25 plus years, 20 plus years. Had I been the person to say, oh, okay, here's a way that you can sell it a little better, a couple of layered effects I think might have sold me on the idea more, like having again a little shimmer, a little something that shows that projector coming on and off, that putting that character there, or you're talking about Sisko wanting to throttle them. Even if you don't have that, even if you have an object pass through to show, like, okay, this person definitely is not there, or even layer it with a little change in audio. So an audio filter, not a very expensive special effect, but something that you could do to where it doesn't just sound like they're in the same room. Right. We talked about that on Trials and Tribulations, how the sound space that you get on a show like that is different than the sound space that you got on a show that was shot in 1968. And that's one of those little things that I think might have sold me on the effect a little bit better. But in this case, I just felt like, oh, okay, they put the little lights on the floor, and we're just going to get the actor in there.
Yeah.
But now I will say that something that I love love about this episode is the nautical feel. And that just speaks to me so much. The Defiant leaving Deep Space Nine with orders being relayed verbally.
Love that.
It just made my heart sing. It just reminded me a lot of those great scenes at the Enterprise leaving space dock in motion picture or preparing for battle in the Wrath of Khan. All those cuts that they did, seeing the guys down on the torpedo tubes lifting the floor plates. Like, why would you need guys to do that? You don't, but for dramatic purposes, we want that,
Right.
So that kind of classic naval battle, like you would see in, Run Silent, Run Deep, that's the sort of thing that influenced TOS and Balance of Terror. It's the kind of, story DNA, stylistic DNA that we then see in Wrath of Khan. This was a great place to revive that,
Yeah, I really like that, too. That really set the tone. There was a comparison that I had in my mind's eye with, say, Crimson Tide, where Denzel Washington's character kept going, Khan sonar, and then sonar would go, sonar Khan, and then just this back and forth, and I felt like that was Nog. Like Nog was like, bridge engineering bridge, and there was just all this chatter. But and the captain was at the center of it all, trying to decipher all these different lines of communication with each department head talking to their departments and relaying that information in real time. Then him having to make all of these different analytical choices and go through the basically kind of the list of the triage list of what's the most important to the least important. What do I need now? What do I need later? Having to think 10 steps ahead. Do I need impulse power now? Do I save that energy for later? So it was just one of those. Right. Very tactile, very real moments.
Another great example of that, currently the Tom Hanks movie Greyhound takes place during Battle of the Atlantic. It's a convoy going from the U.S. to England in the early days of World War II. And same thing. You're talking about this 36-hour period where they're just evading U-boats. So everybody's on edge. Everybody is awake. Everybody has to communicate. But those orders have to get from the bridge to the different departments, to weapons, to engineering, and you've got a limit of technology. So you've just got a guy who has to get those orders correct every single time, and it's harrowing and very intense. So, I love that they brought that here.
Wasn't that the yeoman's job? That's why they call it the yeoman's effort?
I think.
Because he's supposed to basically run and ferry things back and forth. Yeah. And when you say someone's given the yeoman's effort, that's like a really big deal.
Right.
One of the things, and I think is probably my favorite performances of his, maybe in probably the entire series, one of them at least, was when Sisko just completely just tears that punching bag apart, and the way that he goes dark, and he goes, he beat me, that guy beat me, and then like, wow. And probably because he, not only did he sell me, but he kind of oversold me to the point where every single thing that I see now from Sisko is designed for me to feel a certain way based on what he said in that scene. Like, I don't know if there's like a compartmentalized Sisko anymore, where he puts the job first and his feelings second.
Yeah,
I think that it's all one and the same now.
I see what you mean.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, he is very good in that scene. That takes, God, you can tell that it takes a lot out of you. And imagine having to do more than one take of that. Must have been very intense. I think it's good that we had that moment where we did, simply because, like, you got that super heightened emotion and that anger out first, so then you could move forward. You realize that he's still got it in him. He still has that in his head, but at least he's not going to take that out later when the lives of his crew are at stake here. So,
but he does, though.
He does. He does. Yes.
He literally gives those planets a 1-2 punch.
Ooh. Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there is a structural thing that I don't like about this episode, but I would kind of have to give it a little bit of a pass. It's that old Star Trek trope of there's only one ship close enough to do anything about it. I mean, Sanders had already left before Eddington fired the first bioweapon the first time. But suddenly the Defiant is the only ship nearby. Like, did Sanders just go in the opposite direction of Eddington when he left DS9? It's like, I know that we're chasing down Eddington, but I've got this other thing to do somewhere else first, you know?
I have to stop by Babylon 5 first.
Right.
Then I'll go chase Eddington.
Right. Yeah. It just seems like there might have been a better way to, you know, to justify that Defiant is the only ship and Sisko's the only person left at that point.
Well, that is a running trope in Star Trek.
Really
it's kind of like in Star Trek. Yeah. In Star Trek 5, was it, Harv Bennett's admiral comes in and says, hey, Kirk, you're the only ship in the quadrant. Yeah. You know, but our ship is like in shambles. Yeah, but you're the only one.
Yeah.
Right? So when is Starfleet, like, just not fleet?
Yeah, I know.
Just,
like,
you know,
fleet where?
Like,
how many ships do you have? 3? Yeah.
Now, to be fair, though, I know that we're coming off of the events of what happened in First Contact, and then when the Borg ship is heading towards Sector 001, as they always say. You know, it kind of started taking out ships. So I know that Starfleet has been decimated up to a point, but still, you're right. You know, it kind of pigeonholes all of these events to obviously point towards the direction of the Defiant. And even the Defiant at half its capability is better than most Federation ships at their full capability. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, hey, another reference that we should point out is that Dax literally says, you know, the secret life of Michael Eddington, sort of referencing the secret life of Walter Mitty. Mm-hmm. So I totally, you know, that was cool to drop that one in there. And hey, let's talk about Les Mis a little bit. So. I guess I guess the only problem sticking too closely with the story of Les Mis, yes, Jean Valjean is the hero. Yes, Javert is the antagonist, but it is Javert who kills himself at the end. Oh, I apologize. I apologize to our audience. I didn't check. Are we okay to drop a 160-year-old spoiler here? Is that all right?
Too soon, John.
Okay.
It's too soon.
I'm so sorry.
The statute of limitations is at least 250 years.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, so that's why, you know, Mozart killed Salieri. Sorry, not sorry, but
okay.
The statute of limitations has been lifted from there. No, Les Mis is, you know, we've said this before to each other on and off the mic here, that Les Mis is, at least for me, it's my favorite. I know it's one of your favorites. Yep. And it's nice to, I know that we're talking about the literary Victor Hugo reference here, but one cannot help but also bring up the all-time favorite, you know, famous musical. I would say famous musical by Cameron Mackintosh. Yeah, the Javert. Well, okay, so I do have a little bit of a nit to pick with the comparison, because Javert was never. He was never as extreme as Sisko. He was relentless, like Odo. Odo would be more similar to Javert when Odo's trying to find and hunt down his man. Mm-hmm. But Javert never really becomes emotionally unhinged the way that Sisko became.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt that it was more, I know they don't want to go back to the trope that they do all the time with Star Trek, but I felt that it was more Moby Dick than it was Les Mis.
Yeah, okay, good call. The only thing I can wrap it up by asking, did you hear about Jean Valjean? He walked into, much later, Javert's bakery, and he said, hey, Javert, do you have a special on these baguettes? And Javert said, of course, they're 2 for $6.01.
I can't decide if that's a bit pricey for bread, or if it's a real steal.
Hey, we'll get into For the Uniform in just a second, but a quick thank you to everybody who follows us and interacts with us on Patreon. That's at patreon.com/missionlog. If you haven't signed up there, we have a lot of fun there, right? I mean, we get to do these live hangouts. We post the unedited, unexpurgated, and sometimes bizarrely meandering recording sessions for Mission Log. So there's a lot to find over at our Patreon page.
Yeah, probably for the people that don't know, that haven't signed up for Patreon yet, John and I do kind of a pregame show before we do an actual live recording, and that sometimes is, let's just say that it's some nicely added value for all of the Patreon subscribers because they're almost kind of getting a podcast before the podcast. But that's when you get a chance to know your hosts a little bit better, kind of like know what makes us tick, what we like to do, what we enjoy, things that are kind of outside the Star Trek realm. And you may even get a special performance here or two of certain things. And that's all I can really say about that.
Every now and then, for sure. And what's nice is we really do have great conversations there. We've really built up a community with people who are getting to know each other as well as getting to know us. And we have a little deeper conversation sometimes about the shows. It really is fantastic. And then it all comes together when we do our monthly live hangouts, which run sometimes for a couple of hours. So if you want to check that out, please do join us. Patreon.com/missionlog. Again, go explore it at patreon.com/missionlog. We look forward to your support there. Now, Norman, there's a phrase in here that I heard that made me think of you, not because you are this, but because you brought it up before when we were in conversation with one of our guests, and that is the villain is the hero of his own story. Mm-hmm. I loved hearing that in this show. I like how it's used as bait for Eddington, just that idea. So it wasn't just sort of stating this as stating the obvious, but I love how that is sort of a dramatic element within the story as well. Cisco might have spelled out all of this with Dax. They're the ones who are having that conversation. But I do have, I've phrased my notes here really as a series of questions.
Oh, you too?
Yeah, I know, right? So I wonder, did he at any point clue in the others about what was going on, about these revelations that he's had? Was he maybe expecting Dax to clue in the others, or maybe just hoping he would keep everybody on their toes? Because he certainly didn't tell Starfleet about any of this, which surprises me only to the extent, not that he wouldn't tell them everything, but theoretically, Eddington is going to a court-martial. Seems like a lot of these details would come out in the trial.
Yeah. I guess sometimes, say in the Next Generation, we're a little bit used to the conference room meeting where Captain Picard would say, what are my options? Mm-hmm. Right? Here's our problem. Here's the situation that is causing, to put the Federation either in dire straits, or we have to deal with this enemy, or have to deal with a severe problem. And he takes his command staff and say, okay, I don't have all the answers. You're very experienced people. What are the answers? And now we're all kind of collaborating on how to fix this problem. Right. And I don't know, maybe this is the way that Cisco's command style is, but maybe he was just like, you know what? This is my one-man crusade. And if people just follow orders and I don't tell them exactly what they're supposed to be doing, it gives them plausible deniability against a court-martial.
I wonder if there could have been or should have been a moment, because Dax is actually on the same page with him. I wonder if there could have been a moment where, look, you've got Kira shocked, you've got Worf shocked, presumably everybody else on the bridge shocked by what's actually going down. If Dax could have at least given some assurance. It's like, Captain knows what he's doing. Let's, because that it seems, a little bit unhinged, you might say.
But at the same time, though, this came out in 1997, I believe, is the air date. And I do believe that the Renegade Captain sub-films were really hot then.
Okay.
Say, like Hunt for Red October, Crimson Tide, where the captain always was, there was an implied trust because the captain always brought the crew home. He was beloved. Just whatever the captain does, we're fine with that. I was waiting for somebody to do what you were saying, like to do what Denzel Washington's character did in Crimson Tide, is that the executive officer, like Riker, is there to question the judgment of the captain. Yeah. And when he says, fire those 2 torpedoes at these colonies, sure, we understand that these colonies harbor Maquis. We get that.
Yeah.
Isn't there one person in the crew that would have been like, objection, sir? Yeah. Under regulation so-and-so and so-and-so? And then, Sisko would be like, objection noted, fire.
Right. Well,
At least it's on the record.
Yeah, and I think that's why I wanted that moment with Dax, because you just needed another person there to say, we trust the captain, he's right here, just follow along. Or, temper that as well with somebody saying, wait a minute, are you sure you know what you're doing? And yes, your objection is noted, and we go ahead with it. I think there were, look, this is a very strong episode with a lot of strong ideas in it, but this, I think, is going to be one of those things where we just have to question, like, okay, how justified is Sisko in what he's doing? And not just that, but what about the people around him who are also admirable and trustworthy and principled people who are carrying out these plans? So what I'm saying is we are knee-deep in some ethical questions and issues here. And I get why this episode is controversial, and I really, truly appreciate how gray these gray areas are that they are playing in. So I kind of broke it down into a handful of questions. So I'll just I'll throw some out to you. You throw them back at me, and we'll see where we land on this thing. So first things first.
Mm-hmm.
Is Sisko acting out of policy or his personal vendetta? And I think this is a really important determination, is that we try to figure out where exactly Sisko is coming from. Because, look, the opposite of this is Kirk being chased around by Khan. Everything Kirk is doing, he is doing in self-defense, as opposed to, Eddington, who keeps saying, I don't want to kill you. I don't want to fight you. I want to go away. Don't chase me. But here's Sisko absolutely determined to go after him no matter what. Is that right by Sisko?
I mean, I want to preface this entire episode by basically having the ellipsis and then the statement 8 months later, because it's like this episode should have opened up with some type of cold open reminder that Eddington got the drop on everybody, turned traitor, fired on Major Kira, stole all these supplies. I guess there were some type of power converters from the Cardassians, and basically locked out the station. He did that. He did that for 18 months.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we have, season 5 starts, and you have all of these episodes that kind of, tell these different stories. We're getting back to the Bajoran, religious, political dynamics. And then all of a sudden, Sisko is walking to a cave full of refugees, and then there's Eddington. So I felt like the way that it was dropped in, the way that we just returned to this story was really abrupt. And it didn't really feel like there was any kind of pretense or premise or setup, like from a previous episode saying, like say, for example, at the end or a stinger of one of the episodes, like, by the way, sir, we found him. And then, then you'd be like, oh, we're getting back to that story. It's just like when they say it's a cold opening, this really was a cold opening.
Truly.
Like out of nowhere, here's Eddington. So that kind of... It didn't really help me settle into the story as much as I would like to, because I didn't know where my expectations were going. To get back to your question, no, I don't think that Sisko was following Starfleet policy, because he got pulled off the case. Pure and simple.
But that they very conveniently got Sanders out of the way, so the case is still open. The need or the desire for Starfleet to bring in Eddington and court-martial him, and at least, look, the upshot is we take one more Maquis out of the running. All right, fine, we can justify it that way.
Lucky 50-50 chance on that shot.
Yeah, right. But here's Sisko then getting to justify to himself, like, well, it's what Starfleet wants. And oops, it's too bad that Sanders is out of commission right now. We happen to be closer. We have to go fix this. I mean... I think the answer to the question is both. Like, yes, there is a Starfleet need to see this happen, but I think the majority opinion here, the majority of that motivation is that Sisko is driven by personal vendetta. He
said so himself.
He did. Well, he asked the question. He was just like, oh, do you think I'm driven by a vendetta? And Dax sidesteps the question like, this is just your crazy idea, and I get it because I'm a little bit Curzon, and Curzon's a little bit crazy too, like going out on a blood oath and
but
killing
that's not
Klingons.
A no. That's the thing is when somebody tries to justify that in the third person, like a confessional, he's admitting that he's already all of these things. Right?
Yeah.
He's just basically trying to have somebody say, "Oh no, you're not. You're okay." But he's like, "No, he's not," because the only person that would have categorized himself very specifically in those very specific psychological ways is someone who knows that he is that.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You know that. Some people say, like, yeah, I'm neurotic because you know you're neurotic.
Yeah.
Or I'm a nail biter because you're a nail biter. You don't do it because you want somebody to say, like, oh, no, you're not. Well, take a look at my chewed fingernails. Yes, I am.
Right. Right.
You're trying to have some type of, like, absolution or being absolved for what you don't want to believe is true.
So in this case, he is unfit for this job then. He should not be out there. He should not be doing this, and he should probably be court-martialed too. And speaking of things to add up to a court-martial, how about the ethics of his decision to fire torpedoes to poison the atmosphere in a place where human beings are living? Now, granted, they're not under the protection of Starfleet or the Federation anymore, and that was their choice, but that does not mean that they invited being attacked. And not just the terrorism of the attack itself, but literally using those people as pawns in his game with Eddington. We can sort of pat ourselves on the back and say, well, it's an atmospheric bioagent. It didn't kill anybody right away, but it makes the place uninhabitable for 50 years. We see that stuff spread in the atmosphere pretty fast. So I don't know how much of it you have to have in your lungs before it does kill you, but they do make a point of saying it's deadly. But they do have enough time to get away. That's a whole mess of problems right there.
Well, the thing is that when you're doing this from a distance, and this is in Storytelling 101, when you try and affect a story from a distance, you're distancing yourself from the emotional reality of it. The reality of what we're seeing is that Sisko can make that decision. It's very clean for him to do so because the end result is Eddington. The reality of that situation is what we got to see when Jake visited that planet with Dr. Bashir, and all of those people were dying in front of him. Yeah. So that would have been an interesting thing where, say later on, I don't know if it's going to happen, but later on, someone from one of those planets said, hey, you know what? Yeah, sure, you gave us time to evacuate, but you never saw the blind panic of what was happening when we were trying to evacuate. People were getting trampled. Children were left behind. The elderly weren't able to be moved. Yeah. Those are the things that are happening at real time on the surface.
Right.
And he doesn't care. I'm sorry, folks, but he doesn't care. Right. Or else he would never fire those torpedoes.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
This is a huge issue that I have with this episode because it questions what is Starfleet in this story, in Deep Space Nine. Mm-hmm. What is Starfleet? What am I supposed to believe in?
Yeah.
Right? Because here's a note that I wrote to kind of continue this point. Mm-hmm. The biggest guns in the quadrant. Is this what Starfleet has become? And whoever commands the Defiant will always have the advantage because it's the most advanced starship. It's better at 50% than most other ships are at full capability. Right. I said that earlier. Right. And obviously it's true because they could barely make a barrel roll or a turn, but they were able to take out 2 fully staffed Maquis ships almost, right? Yeah. And tow away another ship. So if you have this ship and you have a captain that is vengeance-based and Starfleet doesn't rein you in, what does that mean?
Yeah, right. Well, okay, and right? then that leads to, because I'm going to skip the question here about the obligation that the crew has, because I think we already kind of hit that. Like they should have raised some objection to what was going on, but it really comes down to the question of the aftermath of his actions. He still answers to Starfleet. Starfleet Admiralty was just there when he botched the signing of the treaty, of Bajor joining the Federation. So they were just there. They're already invested in what Sisko is doing out there. And remember, this is not something happening in the Delta Quadrant. This is something that's happening, the Gamma Quadrant. I'm already jumping forward, sorry. This is something that's happening there in the Alpha Quadrant, not too far away, involving humans who, and other species, but who up until a very short time ago were under the protection of Starfleet and or of the Federation, and by extension, Starfleet. This is an unconscionable action. I mean, it is a terrorist attack. And again, it's just simply being done to make a statement in this fight that he has going on with Eddington. So I can't imagine that even as badly as Starfleet wants Eddington to be brought in, to be brought to justice, that they would or could in any way condone Sisko's actions. How many steps are a step too far? First, there was interrupting the negotiations with Bajorans a couple of weeks ago. Now it's this.
It's very concerning to me when it comes to the narrative thread of what we believe that Starfleet is in terms of a principled organization. Going all the way back to, and I know it's kind of jumping the timeline, but it's kind of not, because it's in 2009, but 2009 happened before Deep Space Nine into the
sure,
the
right.
timeline.
I got it. Yeah.
But Admiral Pike, or Captain Pike at the time, says that Starfleet is a peacekeeping armada.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I think that the Defiant's role, or Deep Space Nine's role, was to basically keep the neutrality of the demilitarized zone. And I'm going to say this because I have to be honest, and I think that there might be some people out there that might agree with me. I think that Eddington was right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Eddington was right, and this
way?
Okay. So Eddington's right because he calls Sisko out on being bitter and vengeful.
Yes.
And putting his crew and his ship at risk. Sisko takes out a barely capable ship, the only ship that's capable of defending that area of the quadrant from the Dominion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they're still out there, and the Defiant got taken out basically by one of their own people. What would happen if a fully armed armada of Jem'Hadar warships came through the wormhole without the Defiant there to even put up some kind of defense? The whole quadrant would have been lost.
Yeah.
So he's not thinking about that. It's kind of like Prim, when we were talking about Prim and Darkness and the Light.
Yeah.
Eddington proved that he and the Maquis aren't killers. He did not kill the Defiant or the Defiant's crew. He didn't destroy that ship. And he didn't destroy Deep Space Nine, as he probably could have left so many different trapdoors for it to fall through.
It's funny, as you're saying that, I'm sorry to interrupt, you're saying this, I'm sort of going through my head, what are the transgressions that Kirk carried out? And I'll just go to something like, okay, he disabled a space station, he disabled a starship, he stole a ship, he destroyed that ship with his perfectly willing crew going along with him. He rescued his friend. Now, on his way back to Earth, he went back in time, and by doing so, saved the entire planet, saved everybody on Earth. So we'll punish him for that. But he did save the whole Earth, and let me just point out, in the process, did not fire upon innocent people. So,
yeah.
It's just the level of transgression is really quite stark here. Mm-hmm. It's the firing on innocent people that can't help but bother me, and it should bother everybody, of course. Yeah.
I was watching, so I'm not completely new to this particular scene. I did not see this entire episode in total, but on YouTube there are videos that are basically titled "Why Sisko is the most bad ASS captain ever in Star Trek," and they showed this particular scene. And I disagree with it. I don't think that that's BADASS at all.
Right.
I think that it is borderline terrorism. I think that it is completely out of regulation from Starfleet. Starfleet did not give him the order to fire on civilian planets, regardless of what he believes or not. To do something like that, to target mass populations of people that have not been tried for crimes because he can, because he has the most powerful ship in the quadrant at his disposal, and he himself has kind of admitted that he's a little unhinged. Do you think that this is a good formula? I don't. And I'm not saying that this is a bad episode. I'm saying that this is actually a very good episode.
Yeah.
But what I am saying is that when you take a look at what Eddington is specifically saying about Sisko, Sisko is blinded by vengeance. Sisko is blinded by this fact that there was a guy that he trusted that betrayed him. Sure. Mm-hmm. How many admirals do you think he's working with that aren't betraying him right now?
Yeah.
Hartley. Hartley before, he says that, I don't care what you do, just get Bajor back on the table to sign the dotted line. He's betraying Sisko's friendship because he needs him to perform a job, not because he's his friend.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that I'm down on Sisko. What I am saying is that was a really, really, really difficult scene to swallow when it comes to this is Starfleet, the principled peacekeeping armada that is supposed to bring worlds together and have their officers uphold that mandate, but they don't.
Precisely.
Does Eddington qualify to receive a calm badge of shame? Asking for a friend.
John, do you hear that?
I didn't hear anything.
You didn't hear the people sing?
Oh.
Singing the song
of Angry Men. Angry Men in this episode.
Very angry men.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking about the future of a people, hopefully, who will not be fired on again.
Right. I certainly hope not. I certainly hope not.
So as we are wont to do at the end of all of our episodes, we are going to take a look at how the episode held up for us, and does it stand the test of time, and what are the morals, meanings, and messages. And as you could have probably heard by the tone in our previous segment on discussion, we had a lot to say. But I do hope that everyone takes what we're saying with the spirit and the intent that we are trying to see this episode in an observational way. So let's try and wrap this one up, John, because this was not an easy episode to get through.
No. Look, if we're just talking about how is this produced, how much enjoyment did I get out of watching it, it is a home run. Stylistically, I am in love with this episode, except for the holocommunicator. We hashed that out. Sorry. I will hate it for a while. But here's the thing. It is overshadowed by the brilliant idea to, as a production, lean into this submarine-style warfare. They added a whole other layer of tension and realism to what was happening on screen. It felt great. And Star Trek, up to this point, rarely, if ever, allows dialogue to overlap, mostly because it's too expensive. So when you're doing a TV show, especially where they were shot 20-plus years ago, and it's single camera, multiple setups, you got to move on. You have to have clean cuts. You have to have clean breaks. Get the line of dialogue out. You got a clean break. You move on to the next line. So when you do something where you have a lot of overlap, it limits your editing abilities. You have to shoot longer reels at each shot, at each take. But they did it here, and they did it in a great way. So all those scenes on the Defiant are just fantastic. The acting is taken up to another level. You've got Avery Brooks just really knocking it out of the park and bringing a lot of passion and heat to his role here. There's so much I love about this episode. However, I think when we get into our wrap-up of messages here, it's going to be problematic. So I'm going to leave it there. I just want to leave it there and say, look, as a production, phenomenal. So enjoyable. It was like Wrath of Khan, but done in DS9 style. So for that, yeah, it works very well. How about you, just looking at this as a production?
Oh, production-wise, does it hold up? Absolutely. I think that the narrative strength of this story is incredibly tight. The characterizations are really fleshed out for good or ill, because they do run the spectrum of what we expect from our characters, and the performances are fabulous. I can't say enough about how good Kenneth Marshall is as Michael Eddington.
Yeah.
He is absolutely fantastic, and I think he is such a good foil for Sisko. I think that Kenneth Marshall and Avery Brooks, they just act so well together, which is why I liked the holodeck communicator technology, because I liked having him in that scene, in that stage play type of format. I also love the whole naval dynamic. When they were doing the comm chatter and having Nog relay the communications back and forth, he would have been the great opportunity, though, John, for when Sisko ordered those torpedoes to be fired, where Nog said, "Captain, that's against regulations," because he's a Starfleet.
Yes.
Like, he's a Starfleet newbie, and he's so fresh with the regs, right? And it's almost kind of like you're seeing a little bit of his innocence lost, looking at his hero perpetrate this act of terrorism.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Is this what I'm in for on the command track? Because that's not what I want to be. But he's my hero. So what's happening here?" He's impressionable. He's impressionable that way. And I thought that would have been a good opportunity for Aaron on that. But I thought that whole dynamic with the bridge chatter was just so real, so well done. You're right. It was very much like a balance of terror, Wrath of Khan, and it just felt like you could see the expertise that everybody had without the technology. Like when Dax was saying, change pitch, or Kira says, "I need these online," or Worf's like, the field variants and the torpedoes. Everyone knew what they were supposed to do without one push button technology.
Right.
And that showed how skilled that entire crew was, which was really nice to see, because rarely do you see that, kind of like on these Starship Hiltons. They're just like, push a button, go to warp. Yeah. Well, what if it can't do that? Then we have to explain away everything because we know how it's supposed to be done. Yeah. We just have to hit one button to do it, right? And then everything gets taken care of. So it was nice. The writers did a really good job crafting those scenes.
Yeah. But then we get to messages, and there's something just so incredibly problematic here. And I posed my message really as a question, because I don't know where I can possibly just sum it up as like, pat you on the back and you see here, Timmy, here's what you take away from this episode. We haven't said that in a long time on Mission Log. You see, Timmy, here's today's
Are you pulling a
lesson.
Peter Graves? Is that what you're doing here?
It kind of is like that. Yeah, it was sort of like it's like going back to Lassie. It wasn't Timmy the little boy in Lassie.
I think so, yeah.
Like, you see, Timmy, today's lesson is don't let kids play near the well, But this is definitely not that episode. This episode leaves you with a question. Can you commit a heinous act in order to serve a higher principle? That's why in the last segment I brought up Kirk. That's what jumped to mind here. Here's Kirk is the guy who, and look, I know that we can't just go through DS9 always comparing to other captains. But look, it's Star Trek as a whole, and we get different and conflicting messages from Star Trek very often, especially in the weeds here. Here is a captain in Kirk who is lauded for bending the rules, doing something unorthodox, unconventional, because it's the right thing to do, right? But here we have something taken to a very different level. This episode seems to say, yes, it's okay to commit that heinous act in order to serve the higher principle. But that principle gets really mired in being driven by the personal needs of this captain who is a bit unhinged here. It's a bit overtaken here. Yes, there is a principle in getting the Maquis attacks to stop. Yes, there is a principle in bringing in Eddington for justice. But Sisko violated his principles, and those of the Federation, and Starfleet, for that matter. He terrorizes. We stayed away a little bit from the word, but he committed a terrorist act on innocent people with the intent of saving many more. Sure, there is an upshot to that. But it still doesn't take away from the crime of what he did. Was that the best way to do things? More importantly, was it the Star Trek way to do things? I say that as, a piece of entertainment pop culture that also has morals, meanings, messages buried within it. Was it the Starfleet way of doing things? And that really, I think, and you might wrap this up in a different way, Norman, but I think that gets at the crux of the question that you're asking, because at the end of the day, you're another day older, but at the end of the day, you're asking, even if you have this rogue captain who did this thing, where is Starfleet's responsibility now to step in and say, this is not what we intended. This is not the way we do things. We don't fire on colonists who we hope will find a way out. We hope we'll be okay. It's mind-boggling that we got to this place. I'm okay with the brash act. I'm okay with the character driven by emotions to do something unhinged. What I was not okay with was the sort of comedic slap on the back at the end of the episode that's like, it's almost like the freeze frame moment. Did you remember to tell Starfleet? Oops. Slap on the back, roll credits.
But with much bigger connotations than that, obviously.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that probably the biggest turning point for me, for Sisko, for at least where a line of dialogue is concerned, is when, after he read Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, and then he understood the role of Eddington and how he romantically perceives himself as the hero, Sisko automatically convinces himself that it's time for me to play the villain in order to draw him out. When you accept that, then you accept what a villain would do. It gives you a justification of going that extra step, even betraying your own ethics in order to justify doing the right thing, because that's what needs to be done. There's that old saying, like, somebody has to get their hands dirty. It might as well be me. But is that what a Starfleet captain is trusted with when it comes to upholding the principles of the Federation? So, and he even admitted it to Dax. And I said this earlier, but he did say that to Dax. She says what to him? And she says that I've lost all perspective, that I'm turning this into a vendetta between me and Eddington, that I'm putting the ship, the crew, and my entire career at risk. And if I had any brains at all, I'd go back to my office, sit down, and read Oda's crime reports. Obviously, he's thought about it, because that's what he will be doing if he goes down this dark path. That's why I still believe that Eddington is right, because Eddington knows that that's what Sisko will have to do in order to catch him. So who's really betrayed the uniform in this sense? Eddington, in his mind, believes that he's upholding certain principles of the Federation by defending Federation colonists who were left out in the cold, based on a demilitarized zone treaty that they had nothing to do with. And then the Federation just left them at their own devices, whatever those devices may be. Very little food, very little support, very little supplies, very little recognition from the Federation at all. And then there are Federation officers who are like, that's not what we stand for. We are supposed to protect these people. So the Maquis became the protectors of these people.
Yeah.
And Sisko used those same people as a way to draw out his enemy, the enemy who was protecting these people. And what is Starfleet's investment with the Cardassians in the demilitarized zone anyway? It's just it's a very loose treaty. But Sisko's using that to basically say, these kind of Cardassians that we kind of, we're kind of protecting but kind of don't care about, but kind of have the treaty with, is this the reason why he's ready to betray the principles of his uniform? Because of these people? They're not even Federation colonists. They're not Federation citizens.
Right.
Not to say that it matters, but I'm just saying that there are so many factors at stake that ask or force us to ask this question now: what exactly are the principles of the Federation in the overall narrative of Deep Space Nine? In the last few episodes that we've talked about, I've made specific cases for how we've seen references to the heavy-handedness of the Federation in dealing, say, their control and influence in the Bajoran system when we saw that with Rapture. Okay, the Admiral Watley says, "Do whatever it takes to get the Bajorans back. I don't care what it is. Do it because if it weren't for you, you'd be fired. But we need you here, so get them back." Okay, that's a nice way of being able to salvage a career.
Yeah.
And then in the Begotten, Sisko technically is kind of like the Starfleet whip saying, "Hey, either show me some results or we're handing it over to Starfleet. So, get in line, Odo and Mora, because you only have a limited amount of time before Starfleet takes over." And I'm reminding you of that, by the way. And Sisko didn't have orders, even though that after the Malinche was, it was taken out of the pursuit, and there was no transfer of orders. The captain didn't say, "Okay, I can't do it, so you can do it. I'm going to log this into my official entry as captain of the Malinche and say, Captain's log, our ship has been incapacitated by Maquis raiders. We cannot continue the chase. The Defiant has assisted aid, and now they're going to continue the chase." That's official. That's a passing on of orders. But that didn't happen. So Sisko's renegade, in my book, right now. He's a renegade officer operating without the consent of Starfleet, and he did something that I don't even think Starfleet would have approved or authorized. So where does that leave us? Has Sisko become the manifestation of the Federation's will, given that he has the firepower and the willingness to use it?
That is an incredible question to leave this episode, because he's somebody who apparently the Federation will tolerate with whatever he decides to do, whether it's going off on a personal vendetta like this or wrecking the negotiations with Bajorans, and still leave him, as you put it, with their most powerful asset under his command. So where is the responsibility from the higher-ups? We haven't seen that yet, and I'll be very curious to see if there's any repercussions from what happened in this episode.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer, Rod Roddenberry. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is missionlogpodcast.com. If you would like to support Mission Log directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog. Enjoy all the great Roddenberry podcasts at podcast.roddenberry.com, where you'll find Women at Warp, Priority One, The Trek Files, your daily Star Trek news, and Shabam.
Shabam!
And for more Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, in Purgatory's Shadow.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. If you go after a bunch of people led by Kenneth Marshall's character, could you call that a crawling of the herd? End transmission.
Podcast.roddenberry.com, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.